Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. J.K. Rowling gave the world a magical saga full of wonders, enchantments, and mysteries. Yet, upon closer reading or re-watching the books and films, it becomes clear that the internal logic of the magical system is far from flawless. Today, I want to explore some of the most questionable, and at times absurd, elements that undermine the coherence of the Harry Potter universe. Enjoy watching. Number 1. How are new spells created? As a teenager, Severus Snape invented his own spell, Sectum Sempra, which Harry later used. This fact confirms that wizards can indeed create new spells. But here's the strange part. How exactly do they do it? Potion making is logical: ingredients, proportions, step-by-step instructions, but spells aren't physical substances. How does a wizard determine which word or gesture will trigger the desired magical effect? Why does a specific combination suddenly work, and how does the magical system even know this new spell exists? What if two wizards independently create almost identical spells? Who registers the outcome? Does the first person to cast it get the credit? We don't know. This crucial aspect of magic remains entirely unexplained, despite being at the heart of how magic operates. Number 2. Why aren't there unforgivable potions? We have a clear list of unforgivable curses, but Rowling never mentions unforgivable potions, and yet such brews obviously exist. Polyjuice potion. Harry, Ron and Hermione used it to infiltrate the Ministry. It's an ideal tool for criminals, spies, and would-be usurpers. Verite serum. In theory, it can be resisted, but most wizards probably wouldn't know how. Slip it into a pumpkin juice and someone could spill every secret they've ever kept. Love potions. These essentially override free will disguised under the innocent guise of romance. You can buy them in a shop, yet their effect is disturbingly similar to Imperius. If there are spells worthy of being banned, there are certainly potions that should be outlawed as well, and yet in the books this issue is never even brought up. Number 3. Time turners. Now here's a real logic trap. Rowling created a major problem for herself when she introduced time travel into the Hogwarts universe. First off, a time turner was given to a 13-year-old girl so she could attend more classes. Does that sound reasonable to you? A single device like that could have prevented Cedric's death, the murder of Lily and James, or even Voldemort's return. But no one uses it for any of that. Second, if anyone else had discovered the time turner, wouldn't they try to steal it? Why is Hermione allowed to use one, but others are not? It seems Rowling realized the magnitude of this issue and literally destroyed all time turners in Order of the Phoenix to patch the gaping plot hole. Number 4. The problem with nonverbal magic. In 6th year, Hogwarts students begin learning nonverbal magic, spellcasting without speaking aloud. On paper, this sounds impressive, but on closer inspection, it raises many questions. The wand is just a tool, and magic lives within the wizard. That being the case, nonverbal magic should be closer to the essence of spellcasting, more intuitive, not harder. So why is it presented as so complex? What's more, despite its supposed importance, none of the main battles actually involve nonverbal magic in any meaningful way. Not Harry, not Voldemort. Everything ends with a classic shouted Expelliarmus. Number 5. Owls. Owls are a beloved symbol of the wizarding world, but let's be realistic. These birds, in real life, are unpredictable hunters. Yet in Harry Potter, they become a universal delivery service, operating better than any magical GPS. How does an owl find someone it has never seen? How does it deliver letters to a moving train or to a hidden refuge no one knows about? Why doesn't the Ministry use these birds to track down criminals? Logically, an owl should be able to find Sirius Black anywhere in the world, or Voldemort, or anyone, but strangely no one uses them for that. Number 6. Why only 3 unforgivable curses? 3 spells bear the title Unforgivable: Cruciatus, Imperius, and Avada Kedavra. Yes, they're dangerous, but are they the only ones worthy of that title? The memory charm, Obliviate, as used by Lockhart, can erase someone's identity. In the wrong hands, it could be more terrifying than imperious. There are countless other spells that could be used for manipulation, violence, or destruction. Why did the Ministry single out just 3 spells while ignoring others with equally catastrophic effects? What criteria were used? Number 7. How did Lily's love save Harry? The foundation of Harry Potter's story rests on the great power of sacrificial love. Lily Potter gave her life for her son, and this, we're told, protected Harry from Avada Kedavra. But here's the question. Was she truly the first and only mother to die for her child? Are we to believe that no one else ever loved that deeply enough to produce a magical shield? It's hard to believe that in a 1,000-year magical history there weren't other examples of self-sacrifice. And if there were, why was only Harry granted such protection? Maybe there's more to it than just love. Number 8. Why can't wizards just transfigure money? The Weasleys live in a crooked house held together by magic, yet they never seem to conjure what they lack. Money. Ron wears hand-me-down robes. His wand is second-hand. The family struggles even though Molly can knit with a flick of her wand, and Arthur works at the Ministry. Why not just turn stones into galleons? In the Philosopher's Stone, Professor McGonagall turns a desk into a pig. Surely gold is easier than life, but it never happens. Wizards transfigure buttons into beetles, teacups into rats. But money somehow remains untouchable. The books mention Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, which says food can't be conjured, but no one ever explains whether money falls under this rule. It's not alive, it's not essential. Why not transfigure a bit of copper into a handful of silver? If the transformation were temporary, Gringotts would surely have enchantments to detect it, but Rowling never addresses it. Wizards like the Malfoys stay rich, families like the Weasleys stay poor. The power to reshape matter stops just short of financial freedom. Not because it can't be done, but because the world refuses to ask why. Number 9. How do portraits actually work? When Dumbledore dies, his portrait appears in the headmaster's office. It speaks, it offers advice, it even keeps secrets. I was, somewhat surprised, says Snape, when the painted Dumbledore tells him about Harry's fate. This portrait isn't just decorative, it's active, thoughtful, nearly sentient. But that raises a chilling question. If a painting can replicate Dumbledore's wisdom, personality, and judgment, what exactly died? Is it just a magical echo, or something closer to a soul fragment? And why, if portraits can carry such weight, don't more of them exist? Where's a portrait of Merlin offering counsel in the Ministry? Why can't Hogwarts be filled with the voices of the past, founders, historians, brilliant minds guiding the next generation? If these portraits retain memories, why are they used so casually? Phineas Nigellus Black moves between frames in Hogwarts and Grimmauld Place, relaying messages. So how many portraits can one person have? Can they share knowledge, or are they shallow copies, clever enough to answer, but not to evolve? The magic behind them remains deliberately vague, a mystery wrapped in canvas, speaking wisdom when the plot allows it, and staying silent when it doesn't. Number 10. Why are wizards afraid of technology? Arthur Weasley stared at a rubber duck, baffled. What exactly is the function of a rubber duck? He asked, wide-eyed. This wasn't just curiosity now, it was a window into a deeper divide. Wizards don't understand Muggle technology. They don't try. They don't even pretend to care. The excuse? Magic interferes with electricity. But that alone doesn't explain the cultural rejection. Wizards could build magical versions of phones or radios. Instead, they toss powder into fireplaces and yell into flames. The entire magical communication system depends on birds, fire, and face-to-face visits, like the 14th century in robes. In the Goblet of Fire, Amos Diggory sends a letter via flue powder. His head appears in the Weasleys' fireplace, speaking from swirling green flames. It's dramatic and absurdly impractical. Why hasn't anyone enchanted mirrors to work like screens? Why not link books for instant information sharing? The wizarding world has flying brooms and time-turners, yet lacks basic convenience. Even Hermione, raised in the Muggle world, never pushes to modernize magic. It's not incompatibility, it's resistance. Wizards live in a self-imposed medieval bubble, not because they must, but because they choose to. Number 11. Why is magical healing so limited? When George Weasley lost his ear during the escape from Privet Drive, the mood turned grim. Blood soaked his collar. Mrs. Weasley wept, and yet, when asked if it could be healed, Lupin's answer was simple. Permanent damage. Met a curse it couldn't shift. That was it. No potion, no spell, no second chance. But this is the same world where Madame Pomfrey regrew all the bones in Harry's arm in one night. Where were those miracles now? Why is ear restoration impossible, but full skeletal regeneration treated like a mild inconvenience? Harry, too, never escapes his famous glasses. He fights dragons, survives Cruciatus, defeats Voldemort, yet remains nearsighted. One would think a quick spell or potion could fix his vision. But it never happens. The inconsistency is striking. Wizards can split souls and animate corpses but not correct eyesight. The rules of healing stretch and snap depending on the emotional needs of the plot. George's ear remains lost to show the price of war. Harry's glasses stay to preserve his identity. Magic in these moments bends not to logic, but to symbolism, and forgets its own power in the process. Number 12. The strange selectiveness of protective spells. When Snape raised his wand against McGonagall in the Deathly Hallows, she unleashed a volley of fire that bounced and danced around the corridor. He deflected it, shielded himself, vanished in a flash. Moments later, Harry would face off against Voldemort in the Great Hall, their spells arcing through the air like lightning bolts. And yet, for all the spectacle, one truth remains clear. The shield charm Protego is strangely weak. It can block a hex or stun, but against the Avada Kedavra, it simply dissolves. No wizard, not Dumbledore, not Voldemort, has ever stopped the green flash with magic alone. But Lily Potter did. Not with a wand, not with a spell, with love. Her sacrifice created a protection so ancient and powerful it baffled even Voldemort. His mother died to save him. There's nothing worse than that, Dumbledore says. And if such a defense exists, why has no one tried to recreate it? Why doesn't the wizarding world study Lily's magic the way they study wand lore or spell construction? Why not develop protective enchantments inspired by her act? Charms that don't deflect but neutralize deadly curses at their root? The answer, it seems, lies not in magic, but in narrative necessity. Some spells succeed or fail not by logic, but by design. The killing curse must remain unstoppable, because it heightens the danger. The Patronus must repel Dementors, because it's beautiful, but the lack of magical consistency leaves holes in the world. If love can shield a child, why can't it be weaponized into something replicable? Wizards invent dozens of jinxes, brew potions that manipulate memory, fly through fire, and yet no one, in centuries of magical progress, has found a way to block a single deadly curse. In a world built on power, some truths remain conveniently untouchable. Number 13. Why is magical education so incomplete? Fred and George Weasley smuggled a portable swamp into a Hogwarts corridor. No one stopped them. No one even seemed particularly surprised. In fact, most students cheered. This was the same school where, in first year, a troll wandered the halls. In third year, Dementors hovered near children. In fourth, dragons were unleashed in a school competition. Hogwarts, for all its ancient prestige, ran more like a barely supervised wilderness camp than a structured academic institution. Rules were more like gentle suggestions. Adult intervention was rare, and often came too late. Basic survival skills, not taught. Magical first aid, mentioned only in emergencies. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Katie Bell is cursed by a necklace, no one around her knows how to help. She floats, frozen, screaming in mid-air, until teachers finally arrive. Students witness dark magic firsthand, duel with cursed objects, and wander into the forbidden forest. But no class teaches them how to handle real danger. "Why aren't we learning how to defend ourselves properly?" asked Seamus Finnegan during Umbridge's regime. His question was dismissed, yet it echoed what every rational student must have wondered at some point. There's also the silence around non-magical education. Hogwarts doesn't teach math, or reading beyond spellbooks, or writing except for essays. There are no language courses, no science, no political history, magical or otherwise. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, seems to know Muggle subjects only because she studied them before Hogwarts. Ron, by contrast, doesn't even understand how a telephone works. It creates a strange paradox. Wizards possess immense power, but lack basic tools to interact with the world around them. They are specialists in spells, but generalists in nothing. And this narrow focus has consequences. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Harry tries to warn the school about Voldemort's return, most students don't believe him. Not because he lacks proof, but because they don't know how to evaluate truth. There's no training in logic, no encouragement to question authority, no class on magical ethics. "You're lying, Potter," sneers Draco Malfoy, echoing the blind certainty of an entire system. Wizards may grow powerful at Hogwarts, but rarely wise. In a world where knowledge can mean survival, that's not just a flaw, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Number 14. Why are there no Mass Effect spells? In the Department of Mysteries, spells crackled like fireworks. The Order of the Phoenix had arrived, facing off against a squad of Death Eaters. Spells flew one by one. Stupefy, Expelliarmus, targeted and individual. Each duel was a personal dance of survival, but while the action was intense, the logic behind it cracked under closer scrutiny. Why, after centuries of magical development, are wizards still using single-target spells in full-scale battles? Why has no one created a spell that could, say, freeze everyone in a room at once? The idea of Mass Effect magic never seems to enter the minds of even the greatest minds. Dumbledore himself, during the battle at the Ministry, moves like a duelist, not a general. He fires spells one by one, even when facing multiple enemies. And this is the man who can turn invisible at will, summon phoenixes from fire, and silence a courtroom with a wave. If anyone could unleash a wave of magic to subdue an entire room, surely it's him. Yet even he fights like he's stuck in a narrow frame of rules no one dares break. The lack of Mass Effect magic feels more like a constraint of narrative than of magical ability. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort is dazzling, yes, but still follows the one-spell, one-target formula. A jet of water, a serpent of fire, a shield of glass, visually stunning, but tactically conservative. There was a bang like a gunshot, and the floor exploded where Dumbledore's spell hit it, the book says. Impressive, yes, but again, one spell, one effect. No sweeping enchantments that clear a room, end a fight, or even just knock everyone off their feet. It leaves a gaping question. What are the limits of spell invention in the wizarding world? Wizards can invent new spells. Snape created Sectum Sempra, after all. So why hasn't anyone created a spell like Petrificus Totalis Maxima, immobilizing groups at once? The answer seems to lie not in the world, but in the rules its author set. Rowling crafted duels like sword fights, elegant, personal, cinematic, but war is rarely that tidy, and the absence of chaotic, wide-reaching magic makes one wonder whether the most dangerous restriction in wizarding combat is imagination itself. Number 15. Why do wands have preferences? Of all the enchantments woven through the Harry Potter universe, perhaps none is as mystifying or as quietly unsettling as the notion that a wand, an object carved from wood and strung with the magical core of a mystical creature, can hold a preference, a will, or even a grudge. It is a concept so deeply embedded in wizarding society that few stop to question its logic. The wand chooses the wizard, says Ollivander, with a serene certainty in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And from that moment, the reader is expected to accept a reality in which an object not only selects its master, but sometimes defies or punishes others. But the magic of this system begins to fray under scrutiny, particularly when we examine the deeper implications of wand loyalty, the mechanics of ownership, and the unexplained psychology of lifeless materials. A wand is not a living being. It does not breathe, bleed, or possess a nervous system. It is a crafted tool. Yet in the wizarding world it is treated as a sentient entity capable of loyalty, emotion, and even what appears to be judgment. Ollivander tells Harry if a wand chooses the wizard, that much has always been clear to those of us who have studied wand lore. But he offers no scientific or magical explanation for how a wand chooses. There is no known charm, no incantation placed upon a wand that grants it this decision-making ability. Instead, it's implied that the materials, wood and core, form some sort of arcane intelligence. But even the components themselves are not truly sentient. Unicorn hair, phoenix feather, and dragon heartstring are magical, but they are not conscious. If we step back and compare wands to other magical objects, the inconsistencies become starker. Take, for example, the sorting hat, an artifact that truly possesses a fragment of intelligence infused with the thoughts and personality of Godric Gryffindor. It speaks, sings, reflects, argues. The hat is undeniably sentient, but it is one of a kind, a rare enchanted item created with intention and identity. A wand, on the other hand, is mass-produced by wand makers like Ollivander. While each is unique in composition, they are not said to be infused with a human mind or personality. And yet they are treated as individual beings capable of behavior, memory, and discernment. Why does a crafted object possess this almost spiritual agency? Consider Harry's first encounter with his wand. It's a dramatic moment. The wand shoots a burst of red and gold sparks into the air, and Ollivander's eyes light up with a kind of reverent recognition. "Curious? Very curious," he whispers, noting the connection between Harry's wand and Voldemort's. But what causes the wand to respond to Harry at all? Why does it not react this way to Dudley or any other wizard who might have picked it up? The story implies a deep bond, one that transcends logic or spellwork. But it remains unexamined. The system is treated as natural law rather than something worthy of analysis. Now examine the case of Draco Malfoy's wand. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry uses Draco's wand after disarming him at Malfoy Manor, and it works surprisingly well. Later, he learns from Ollivander that he has won the Elder Wand by defeating Draco, who had, unbeknownst to everyone, become its master by disarming Dumbledore. This progression strains credulity. The Elder Wand, considered the most powerful wand in existence, changes allegiance not through bloodshed or spellcasting, but simply by the act of disarming, and it follows this allegiance like a hound, detecting shifts in dominance even across distance and time. How does it know who its master is? There is no magical tether described, no conscious link or enchantment that allows the wand to sense defeat or dominance, yet it does. Automatically, mysteriously. When Harry confronts Voldemort in the final moments at Hogwarts, the logic reaches its breaking point. Voldemort believes himself to be the true master of the Elder Wand because he killed Snape, whom he thinks was the wand's previous master, but the wand refuses to perform for him, eventually turning on him in the final spell. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in the world, had come to rest in the hand of Harry Potter, the text says. But this transfer of loyalty is not due to Harry holding the wand. It is due to a previous moment, disarming Draco. This fragile chain of disarmaments feels more like a narrative convenience than a system governed by magical law. If wand ownership is transferred by force, then what of wands lost in accidents or passed down through generations? Even in earlier books, wands behave in unexplained ways. When Harry's and Voldemort's wands meet in Goblet of Fire, the phenomenon of priori incantatem occurs, not just because the wands share phoenix feather cores, but because the cores come from the same phoenix. The result is a magical anomaly, one that Ollivander himself admits is both rare and unpredictable. But again, there is no theory presented for how wand cores know their origins, or why the phoenix's donation grants such a strong, almost moral connection between the wands. Is the consciousness of the phoenix somehow alive in both? Or is this simply a plot? Device used to explain a miraculous escape, and what of wand resistance? In The Half-Blood Prince, Ron's wand breaks in the Battle of the Seven Potters. Later, he uses a wand taken from a snatcher, but complains of its poor performance. Hermione, too, borrows Bellatrix's wand under duress and struggles to perform magic effectively. The implication is that the wand refuses to perform at full capacity. But this resistance isn't universal. Harry uses Draco's wand with ease. Snape, a half-blood, uses Lily's wand as a child without apparent difficulty. So what defines the barrier? Is it magical compatibility? Emotional alignment? If so, how is that compatibility measured? Number 16. Why is there no oversight of magical artifacts? In the world of magic, where laws are meant to contain the extraordinary and the impossible is an everyday reality, there remains a glaring oversight that continues to threaten the very balance of wizarding society. The problem lies not in the misuse of known spells or even the abuse of dangerous potions, but in the unchecked creation of magical artifacts, from objects that can split a soul to items capable of altering memory, perception, or reality itself. The absence of oversight in their creation is more than just a narrative inconsistency. It is a danger that no institution, not even the vaunted Ministry of Magic, has ever properly addressed. Consider the case of Tom Riddle, later known as Lord Voldemort. A gifted student, yes, but still a teenager when he first began investigating the creation of Horcruxes. With nothing but access to the restricted section of the Hogwarts library and a willingness to murder, he initiated the most terrifying chain of magical invention known to the wizarding world. "How do you split your soul?" he asked Slughorn, who responded with terror at the thought of such dark magic. "Murder! By committing murder, killing rips the soul apart." And yet, nothing in the system prevented him from using that knowledge. Even after Voldemort created not one, but 7 Horcruxes, there is no indication that any authority was alerted. No magical registry was triggered, no regulatory body investigated the unnatural preservation of his soul. This is not a flaw in logic, it is a flaw in magical governance. Horcruxes are, by all accounts, weapons of mass destruction, objects that ensure a dark wizard cannot be killed, and therefore cannot be stopped, and they can be created by any wizard with a book and the capacity to kill. But Horcruxes are only the most dramatic example. Let us not forget the Mirror of Erist, a magical item that shows not truth, not knowledge, but a person's deepest desire. Dumbledore himself admitted men have wasted away before it, not knowing if what they saw was real or even possible. This mirror, dangerous in its subtle manipulation of the mind, sat unregulated in a school for children. Who made it? Why was it never locked away in the Department of Mysteries, where dangerous magical items are supposed to be kept under surveillance? There is no answer. And what of time turners? In Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione Granger is granted access to one, not to conduct critical research or investigate historical events, but to attend multiple classes at once. The device, capable of altering timelines and unraveling the very fabric of causality, is given to a teenager. And only years later is it mentioned that the entire stockpile of time-turners in the Department of Mysteries was destroyed in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. We are to believe this vault of time-warping technology had no security sufficient to survive a few stray curses. The Marauder's Map is another glaring example, created by 4 students, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. The map not only reveals every person within Hogwarts Castle, but also their exact location and secret passages. Such a device could be used to stalk, to manipulate, or even to assassinate. And yet it went entirely unnoticed by school staff. No detection spells, no licensing, no magical oversight. Years later, Fred and George Weasley stumbled upon it, using it to dodge authority, not realizing its potential implications. In contrast to this chaos, the Ministry of Magic exerts astonishing control in other areas. They regulate apparition licenses, restrict underage magic, and tightly monitor the misuse of Muggle artifacts. Arthur Weasley's job in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office demonstrates how seriously the Ministry takes a magically enhanced toaster, but not a soul-trapping locket. Where is the Department for the Regulation of Magical Invention? Why is there no ethical board that oversees the creation of new magical tools? The fact that Fred and George Weasley, mere schoolboys, managed to create an entire line of joke products, some of which can manipulate memory, emotions, and physical appearance, without any oversight, tells us all we need to know. Their skiving snack boxes could simulate illness convincingly enough to fool adult witches and wizards. Their love potions raised ethical questions about consent and autonomy, and yet they operated freely in Diagon Alley without so much as a background check from the Ministry. Perhaps the most haunting example of magical irresponsibility is the cursed diary of Tom Riddle, a Horcrux that also functioned as a sentient, manipulative artifact. It did not just store a fragment of soul, it possessed Ginny Weasley, used her body to attack students, and nearly resurrected its creator. And how did this artifact reach her? Lucius Malfoy placed it in her cauldron. There was no magical customs, no detection of the dark magic within. The diary passed through the wizarding equivalent of airport security like a paperweight. Magical inventions in the Harry Potter universe follow no recognizable system of classification. There is no clear tier of artifact safety, no known licensing procedure for the creation of magical objects, and no formal process for retiring dangerous inventions. Even the Department of Mysteries, which appears to house some of the most powerful magical phenomena, such as the Veil of Death, the Hall of Prophecy, and the Brain Room, operates in secret without transparency, public oversight, or even internal review. Its employees are unnamed, its protocols unknown. In The Half-Blood Prince, we learn of the advanced spellwork Severus Snape devised as a student. The Sectum Sempra curse, capable of causing fatal bleeding, was hidden in the margins of a textbook. No authority ever investigated the source or distribution of such spells. When Harry used it, no magical system tracked the incident or registered the spell's usage. If spells this destructive can be casually jotted into a schoolbook, what else lies forgotten on dusty shelves? Number 17. Why don't Muggles notice magic? It begins, oddly enough, with a wall, a plain, red-bricked barrier between platforms 9 and 10 at King's Cross Station, unassuming, even dull. Yet once a year, hundreds of robed children hurtle toward it with trolleys, vanish into its surface, and emerge on platform 9 3/4. It's a marvel of magic, hidden in the very heart of London, tucked among throngs of non-magical travellers. And still not a single Muggle ever seems to notice. They don't stop to gawk. They don't call security. No one screams when a boy disappears through stone. We are told it is because of magical enchantments, concealment charms, notice-me-not spells, perhaps even obliviation in emergencies. But magic like that must be exacting, relentless, and comprehensive. The idea that a place as busy as King's Cross could host a magical portal without a single Muggle incident strains even the most generous suspension of disbelief. And it is not the only example that tests the consistency of magical secrecy. For all its supposed rigour, the statute of secrecy appears riddled with holes. Consider the flying Ford Anglia. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry and Ron miss the Hogwarts Express and, in a moment of spectacular poor judgment, steal Arthur Weasley's bewitched car. They fly it all the way from London to Scotland, low over roads, scraping treetops and occasionally soaring high enough to be mistaken for a plane. And yet, all we've got to worry about now are airplanes, Ron says, cheerily. By the time they crash into the Whomping Willow, they've travelled over half the country. J.K. Rowling writes that a Muggle in Peebles saw a flying Ford Anglia. Just one. No mention of the hundreds of others who might have seen a car skimming the clouds. No air traffic control alerts. No journalists chasing the story. This peculiar selectiveness suggests a problem. If the enchantments preventing Muggles from seeing magic are as absolute as claimed, how does even one person glimpse the car? If they are not absolute, then why aren't there thousands of similar sightings each year? The magical world exists alongside the Muggle one, but its rules of concealment are disturbingly inconsistent, obeying narrative convenience more than logic. Take the Quidditch World Cup in Goblet of Fire. The Ministry goes to great lengths to hide the event, setting it up in a remote moor, creating magical tents and crowd concealment. There are anti-Muggle charms, memory charms, even full-time obliviators on duty. Yet the precautions seem oddly ineffective. When Death Eaters attack after the match, they float Muggles into the sky and burn the campsite. A Muggle family is tortured in front of wizards. This is not a subtle event. Fire, flying bodies, and chaos. Were there no Muggles camping nearby? No satellites in orbit? No curious hikers stumbling onto the scene? The Ministry's solution, as always, is memory modification. But this, too, raises troubling questions. Are we to believe that every time a Muggle sees something magical, a dragon overhead, a spell misfired, a house exploded, there's an obliviator waiting in the wings? Magic is not rare in Rowling's world, it is everywhere. It leaks out of Hogwarts, spills from careless wizards, lives in magical creatures. It's not an exception, it's a daily reality, and that reality seems impossible to quarantine so perfectly. Even the Ministry itself is in plain sight. In Order of the Phoenix, the entrance is a red telephone booth located in the middle of Muggle London. One dials a number, descends underground, and enters a vast magical bureaucracy. And no Muggle has ever accidentally dialed those numbers, never leaned on the phone by mistake. No maintenance workers ever opened the booth for repairs. It's difficult to believe that no one has tripped the mechanism in centuries. Once again, the story demands that Muggles be impossibly oblivious, or that magic be so precise it borders on divine intervention. Hogsmeade is another enigma. A whole village of wizards, just a short walk from a school filled with magically gifted teenagers. It's home to enchanted shops, magical sweets, invisibility cloak sales, and joke items that defy physics. But Hogsmeade is not under an unbreakable dome. It is not shielded from aerial drones or satellite images. And still, no Muggle has ever found it, no cartographer noticed the strange blank spot on a map. In the age of Google Earth, this becomes increasingly implausible. The battle at the Department of Mysteries is perhaps the most damning case. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry and his friends engage Death Eaters in a violent clash under the Ministry of Magic. They blow apart walls, shatter prophecies, and fight among glowing orbs. The battle ends with Sirius Black falling through the veil and Harry screaming in grief. The chaos is contained within the Ministry, but magic of this scale surely echoes through magical barriers. Are Muggle workers in the building above unaware? Are there no vibrations, no sounds, no damage? Magic this loud must leave marks. Then there is the final battle at Hogwarts. In Deathly Hallows, giants roam the grounds. Spells fly like artillery. Parts of the castle are destroyed. It is visible from the hills, from nearby villages. There are shouts, lights, crashes, dragons in flight, and yet no Muggle ever stops and wonders what's happening. Are we to assume every single resident of Hogsmeade, of the nearby Scottish countryside, is either magical or oblivious? The idea feels less like a concealment charm and more like narrative convenience. Number 18, why is Hogwarts the only school in Britain? In the heart of the British wizarding world stands a solitary monument to magical education, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Grand, ancient, and revered, the castle has served generations of witches and wizards since the 10th century. But the deeper one delves into the mechanics of magical Britain, the more apparent a troubling question becomes: why is there only one school? In a society as old and developed as the wizarding world, with its own laws, economy, and even government, the existence of a single, centralized educational institution raises more questions than it answers. There are no regional schools, no alternatives, no academies for the gifted, or programs for the challenged. Whether a child lives in rural Cornwall or the crowded streets of Manchester, they receive the same letter by owl on their 11th birthday, inviting them to the same remote castle in Scotland. Even the Muggle world, with all its flaws and inefficiencies, offers far more flexibility. Students can attend boarding schools, day schools, specialized institutions, religious academies, or secular programs. Why then would a society capable of defying the laws of nature itself fail to evolve past a single institution for an entire population? Take the case of Neville Longbottom, a boy who showed very little magical talent in his early years. His family even doubted whether he would ever receive a Hogwarts letter. His great-uncle Algy had to drop him from a window just to see if he'd bounce. This is not just an anecdote, it's a window into a rigid system with no safety nets. What if Neville had been a late bloomer with a gentler nature? What if he had lived in a world where there was a smaller, local school that nurtured less confident magical children? The idea of forcing him into the same environment as high-performing prodigies like Hermione Granger seems not only unfair, but actively harmful. Hermione herself, though brilliant, spent the first months of her Hogwarts career being mocked for knowing it all. She had no opportunity to skip grades, to take accelerated courses, or to be placed with students on her intellectual level. While Professor McGonagall respected her intellect and teachers often praised her, the structure of Hogwarts simply did not allow for differentiated instruction. One standardized curriculum served all. Had there been a more specialized institution, perhaps a magical academy of science and theory, Hermione could have flourished in an environment that challenged her rather than left her alienated. Contrast this with Draco Malfoy, who from his first day at Hogwarts carried the arrogance of someone who had been groomed for power and privilege. His family likely would have preferred an elite, preparatory school for purebloods, but no such alternative exists. Instead, Draco had to share classes with Muggle-borns like Hermione and half-bloods like Harry. From a social justice standpoint, this seems commendable, but from an educational perspective, it leaves no room for parental choice. Whether your values align with the Malfoys or the Grangers, you have no alternative but to send your child to Hogwarts. In any modern educational framework, such an arrangement would be unthinkable. The implications of this monopoly are troubling. In Order of the Phoenix, we witness what happens when the Ministry of Magic tries to take control of Hogwarts by installing Dolores Umbridge as High Inquisitor. There is no competing institution to act as a safeguard. If Hogwarts is compromised, the entire magical youth of Britain is affected. No backup system, no contingency plan. As Dumbledore says, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. And yet, for centuries, that is precisely what the wizarding world has done. Consider students with disabilities. Hogwarts is an ancient castle with moving staircases, high towers, and unpredictable architecture. What if a child were in a wheelchair or had visual impairments? There is no record of accessible education for magical children who need accommodations. While some might argue that magic can solve any physical limitation, that assumption erases the reality of children who require specific support. In the Muggle world, there are schools equipped to handle these needs. In the magical world, there is Hogwarts, and only Hogwarts. Even the way Hogwarts selects students is shrouded in mystery. The magical quill at Hogwarts writes down the name of every magical child at birth. But what about squibs like Argus Filch, who are born into magical families but show no magical talent? He never had the chance to attend any school. He wandered the magical world as a bitter outsider, eventually ending up as a janitor in the very school that rejected him. There are no adult literacy programs for squibs, no institutions that cater to their unique situation. The magical world simply forgets them. And then there's the question of cultural diversity. Britain has a vibrant Muggle population composed of people from various backgrounds, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, English, and beyond. Are the cultural needs of magical children from these backgrounds represented in a single school model? The answer appears to be no. Hagrid casually mentions that there are other wizarding schools in the world, Durmstrang and Beauxbaton, for example, but none within the UK except Hogwarts. Even Muggle Britain has schools with instruction in Welsh or Gaelic. Magical Britain, meanwhile, expects every child to conform to one model of magical education in one language, following one ancient curriculum. There are no part-time schools, no night classes for older students who might discover magic late, no magical homeschool programs for anxious children, no local academies where children can attend classes during the day and return home at night. For children like Harry Potter, whose home life was abusive, Hogwarts offered refuge. But for other children, being torn from their families at age 11 and dropped into a vast castle with hundreds of strangers could be traumatic. The lack of options speaks to a system built for the convenience of the institution, not the needs of the students. Even the subjects taught at Hogwarts suggest a strange rigidity. Potions, transfiguration, charms, and herbology remain unchanged over centuries. There are no electives in magical journalism, art, ethics, or even modern magical technology. The closest we see to a deviation from the standard path is divination, a subject many students mock. Luna Lovegood, a student with a deeply creative and unconventional mind, would have benefited immensely from a school that valued abstract thinking and imagination. At Hogwarts, she is seen as eccentric and odd because the system offers no place for her uniqueness. The lack of a standardized magical testing system across multiple institutions also creates problems. The OWLs and NEWTs are taken only at Hogwarts, and their results define the professional futures of all magical children. A bad teacher, or a year like the one under Umbridge, can devastate a student's academic life. In Half-Blood Prince, we learn that Professor Snape only accepts students whose score exceeds expectations in potions. Imagine if there were multiple schools, each offering different standards, grading methods, and approaches to teaching. Students would have real opportunities to thrive in environments tailored to their strengths. There's also the glaring issue of technological ignorance. Wizards are so detached from the Muggle world that they cannot use a phone, send an email, or operate basic household appliances. Arthur Weasley, head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, famously asks, "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" A wizard of his age and position should not be this uninformed. If magical Britain had multiple schools, one might imagine that at least one would specialize in Muggle studies or interdisciplinary education. Wizards could learn to bridge the gap between worlds instead of remaining isolated in magical echo chambers. What happens to magical children who, for one reason or another, do not wish to attend Hogwarts? The books make no mention of alternative education, private tutoring, or apprenticeships. A child who refuses Hogwarts is effectively left without an education, and while the magical world does not have the same legal system as the Muggle one, it is hard to imagine that denying a child their only educational opportunity wouldn't have long-term consequences. In a world where Obliviate can erase memories, is there even oversight to ensure that magical children receive the support they need? It's also worth noting that Hogwarts enforces a strict house system, sorting children into Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff based on vague personality traits. This occurs when the child is 11, an age when most children are still forming their identities. A single decision made by a magical hat defines their social circle, dormitory, and even potential career trajectory. If more schools existed, there would be alternative sorting systems, new educational models, and a chance to grow without being boxed into a single identity before puberty. One cannot help but think of Tom Riddle, the orphan boy who would become Lord Voldemort. Had there been a magical school equipped to deal with trauma, loss, and psychological support, would his story have ended differently? Dumbledore did his best, but Hogwarts was never designed as a place of healing. It was a school, and a rigid one at that. A system with more variety, more compassion, and more options might have changed the course of magical history. Magical Britain needs more than nostalgia for a castle. It needs a conversation about education, about choice, about the future. The current system is held together not by logic or fairness, but by tradition. Hogwarts may be beloved, but love alone cannot justify a monopoly on the minds of every young witch and wizard. A society that prides itself on magic should be capable of envisioning something better. Number 19. Why can't wizards cast spells without wands? Harry Potter was only 15 months old when he performed one of the most powerful magical acts in wizarding history. No wand, no training, no conscious intent, just raw, instinctive magic surging from within. And it was enough to destroy the most feared dark wizard of all time. The killing curse rebounded, Voldemort's body was torn apart, and the legend of the boy who lived was born. This incident alone should have shattered every assumption about the need for wands. Yet, years later, Harry, now a trained wizard, could barely cast a simple spell without his wand. This contradiction lies at the heart of the wizarding world, and it demands scrutiny. In The Philosopher's Stone, Ollivander famously told Harry, "The wand chooses the wizard." The phrase has become a sort of gospel in magical society, treated as immutable truth. But this reverence for wands has created an intellectual blind spot. The magical community clings to the belief that wands are indispensable, even when countless examples from their own history suggest otherwise. The question lingers like a spectre in the corridors of Hogwarts. If magic lives inside the wizard, why is the wand treated like the key to unlocking it? House elves are perhaps the most glaring example of wandless magic. Dobby clicks his fingers and vanishes with a pop. He levitates cakes, heals injuries, and even blasts Lucius Malfoy across a hall, all without a sliver of holly or phoenix feather in sight. No incantations, no rigid wrist movements, just intent and power. Their abilities are often dismissed as a different kind of magic, as if human wizards are biologically incapable of performing similar feats. But is this true, or is it simply a matter of training and tradition? In the Chamber of Secrets, Dobby breaks magical laws inside a Muggle home, levitating a cake with alarming precision. The Ministry doesn't question how he did it. Instead, they assume it was Harry because their system is built around wand traceability. This moment reveals more than just bureaucratic incompetence. It shows that the Ministry itself doesn't monitor raw magic, only wand usage. If the system can't track wandless spells, could it be that the wizarding world intentionally limits such abilities for the sake of control? The educational system is complicit. From the first day at Hogwarts, students are handed wands and instructed to practice precise incantations. Charms, transfiguration, even simple levitation, all revolve around wand work. The curriculum assumes that the wand is the only path forward. At no point are students taught to feel the magic inside them, to channel it without wood and core. It's as if wandless magic is a dangerous, unregulated road best left unexplored. Yet in the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry is attacked by Dementors in Little Whinging, He casts a powerful Patronus in the heat of panic, suggesting that strong emotion can unlock magic even under duress. This could be a gateway to wandless spellcasting if the society chose to explore it. Professor Dumbledore himself occasionally demonstrated the ability to perform wandless magic. In Half-Blood Prince, he lights lamps with a flick of his fingers. He summons items and conjures magical barriers without even reaching for his wand. If the headmaster of Hogwarts can do this, why isn't it taught? Why is it reserved for only the most gifted, the most eccentric, or the most desperate? Voldemort too performed wandless magic. In The Goblet of Fire, he tortures Bertha Jorkins before he has a wand, manipulates shadows, and casts curses using only the power of his reborn form. This supports the idea that experienced wizards can train themselves to cast spells without wands. The fact that only the most dangerous or powerful wizards explore this path suggests a dangerous cultural complacency. The wizarding world is not interested in expanding magical potential, it is interested in regulating it. Wands are presented as conductors in the books, objects that focus and channel existing power. But the act of focusing should not be mistaken for generating. A conductor does not produce electricity, it merely gives it direction. So what if a wizard learned to direct that current without needing a rod of wood and dragon heartstring? Would it be harder? Possibly, but impossible. Clearly not. What's more, the absolute dependence on wands makes magical society dangerously fragile. In battle, a wizard disarmed is often helpless. Consider the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. When Lucius Malfoy loses his wand, he scrambles uselessly. When Hermione is stunned, her wand falls from her hand, and she is no longer a threat. Every duel becomes a contest not of raw power, but of reflexes and grip. This isn't magic, it's fencing. What military doctrine would ever tolerate a soldier who can only fight when holding one specific item? The fact that wizards don't train to cast spells without wands is a strategic failure, not a tradition. Let's remember Ariana Dumbledore, a child traumatized, yes, but also a girl who was never right again after being attacked by Muggle boys. Her magic became unstable, erratic, bursting forth in fits. She never used a wand, she couldn't, but her raw magic was so strong it inadvertently killed her mother. It's tragic, but also telling. The innate magic was still there, untamed and fierce. What if she'd been guided, nurtured, taught to control her inner power without a wand? Would she have lived a fuller life? Consider also the magical outbursts of Muggle-born children before Hogwarts. Neville Longbottom bounced when dropped from a window. Lily Evans made a flower bloom in her hand. Even Tom Riddle could hurt people, summon animals, and manipulate objects, all before owning a wand. These were not anomalies, these were common signs of magical youth. If this innate magic is present in children, why is it suppressed instead of developed? The truth is, wand-based magic is a system, a highly controlled one. Wands can be registered, tracked, and identified. Ollivander keeps records of every wand he has ever sold. The Ministry uses the trace to monitor underage magic, but it's not the magic that's traced, it's the wand. In a society that fears rebellion, this is not a flaw, it is a feature. To allow wandless magic would be to relinquish control over who can perform it and when. Imagine if every wizard could hurl spells without reaching for their pocket. Imagine if magical barriers couldn't be disarmed by simply flicking a wand away. The entire tactical structure of the wizarding world would collapse. Duels would become battles of the mind and willpower, not choreographed dances of Latin phrases and twitches. The Ministry would lose the ability to detect and suppress illegal magic. And so the educational system pretends it is impossible. One curious case is that of Credence Barebone from the extended lore. An obscurial, his power is wandless and volatile, shaped by years of repression. He levels buildings and slaughters trained auras. No wand ever touches his hand, and yet he poses a threat greater than any spellbook-trained wizard. The magical community fears him not because he's an obscurial, but because he proves what happens when raw magic grows unregulated. His very existence is proof that the system is flawed by design. The idea that wands are necessary has never been tested in an institutional way. There are no classes at Hogwarts titled Inner Magic, Casting Without Tools. There are no ministry initiatives encouraging alternative casting methods. There is no aura training in wandless defense. Instead, any demonstration of such skill is treated as exotic or dangerous. When Dumbledore snaps his fingers to vanish a chair or produce a rope, no one asks how, they marvel and move on. It is regarded as a parlour trick, not a skill worth mastering. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry's wand breaks, he becomes nearly powerless. He stumbles through battles, hides, runs. But this is the same Harry who once blew up Aunt Marge in a fit of anger, unintentionally inflating her like a balloon. The same Harry who summoned his broomstick across the Quidditch pitch with a shouted "Accio" in front of a crowd. The same Harry who forced Voldemort's soul fragment out of his body as a baby. That magic didn't come from a stick, it came from within. So why is adult Harry less capable than infant Harry? Perhaps it's because wand training stifles natural magic. The focus on externalization, memorization, and rigid technique may dull the very instincts that gave children like Lily and Neville their spontaneous power. By the time a young wizard finishes school, their inner magic is so deeply conditioned to rely on a wand that they can no longer access it alone. The tool becomes a crutch, the crutch becomes a necessity, and the necessity becomes law. The culture of wands is deeply ingrained, but it is not inevitable. Alternative magical traditions exist. In Africa, the wizarding school Ouagadougou reportedly teaches students to cast spells through hand gestures alone. Their magic is respected, powerful, and centuries old. This is not speculation, it is canon. The existence of a thriving educational system based on wandless magic shatters the illusion that wands are essential. It is simply the British wizarding world that refuses to change. And change is necessary. A society that trains its youth to be helpless without a specific tool is a society that prepares for weakness. It would be as if Muggles only taught children to write with fountain pens and panicked when one snapped. The potential for growth, innovation, and resilience is enormous, but deliberately suppressed. The wand is not a key, it is a leash. The most dangerous idea in magical Britain is not dark magic, but independent magic, magic that cannot be tracked, registered, or taken away. And so the myth is preserved. The wand chooses the wizard. But the truth is, the wizard never needed the wand to begin with. Number 20. Why study astronomy at a magic school? No one questioned the presence of cauldrons simmering in dungeons or lessons filled with hexes and countercurses. At Hogwarts, magic was a language carved into the soul of every hallway. Students brewed draughts to mend bones, conjured charms to levitate feathers, and studied curses dark enough to chill the spine. Every class at Hogwarts seemed carved from the bone of magical necessity, except one. As the clock tower struck midnight, a group of tired-eyed students trudged up the spiral stairs of the Astronomy Tower. They carried telescopes and parchment, bundled against the cold wind. There, beneath the star-strewn sky, they would squint at constellations and sketch the heavens. This was astronomy, a required subject in a school of sorcery. But to what end? In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the first-year students had astronomy every Wednesday at midnight. Professor Sinistra led the class, but her role throughout the series remained nearly invisible. No lesson from her was quoted. No crucial magical moment ever hinged upon a student's ability to name Orion's belt. The stars shone brightly, but their relevance to the actual act of spellcasting remained cloaked in shadow. And yet the subject was there, elevated among transfiguration and charms, given equal weight and structure. What was the school teaching and why? Consider the many subjects deemed elective or outright absent from the curriculum. Healing magic, the practical foundation of magical medicine, was not a standard subject. Students learned how to regrow bones, yes, but not how to perform a diagnostic charm. St. Mungo's staff were trained elsewhere. Arithmetic, too, was missing. Magical construction, wand law, magical law, none of these were required. But astronomy, compulsory. Even divination, often dismissed as imprecise by professors like McGonagall, at least produced prophecies and shaped destinies. But astronomy's contribution to magical outcomes was never clarified, never demonstrated. The irony is potent. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry and Hermione used a time-turner to attend multiple classes. The schedule was impossibly packed, yet Hermione never dropped astronomy. She dropped divination, yes, but not the class where she shivered for hours while charting planetary alignments. Why? What magic was tethered to the sky? The books never tell us. Not once does a plot-critical spell depend on the moon's phase or a planet's position. And yet every student had to learn it. One could argue that astronomy was essential for more esoteric branches of magic. Perhaps it informed the theoretical underpinnings of certain spell types. But then again, no example confirms this. The core mechanics of spellcasting in the Potterverse rely on intention, incantation, and wand work. Potion-making leans on ingredients and process. Transfiguration demands precision and concentration. None of these disciplines cite the stars. Not even in advanced potion-making is there a footnote advising one to stir the draught of living death under a waxing moon. Magical events unfold without a whisper of celestial mechanics. The sole faint echo of astronomy's relevance comes in The Half-Blood Prince, when Professor Trelawney mutters about Saturn being dominant and bringing doom. But Trelawney, for all her occasional truth, is not taken seriously by her colleagues, and she teaches divination, not astronomy. Her interpretation of celestial signs is intuitive and irrational, whereas astronomy is presented as objective and scientific. This begs the question, is astronomy taught at Hogwarts merely for the aesthetic of a mystical education? In truth, astronomy at Hogwarts feels less like a magical necessity and more like a relic of a different time when magic and science were interwoven. The ancient wizards perhaps believed the heavens guided the flow of magical energy. Wands made from elderwood or phoenix feather were considered powerful because of patterns noticed over millennia. But in modern wizarding practice, none of this was codified. No spell in the known lexicon has its effectiveness dictated by Mars retrograde. And yet, the students climb the tower. There's something romantic about the image. Hogwarts under starlight, the turrets casting shadows on frost-silvered tiles, students hunched over telescopes. Rowling paints the scene vividly, even if she never justifies it. Is it possible that this subject remains not because it's useful, but because it's beautiful? Could it be that the stars, while irrelevant to the mechanics of magic, hold emotional weight? That the inclusion of astronomy is symbolic, representing the unknowable, the unreachable, the timeless rhythm of the cosmos within which even wizards are but stardust? But Hogwarts is not a monastery, it's a school, and schools justify their curriculum by function. Even history of magic, taught in a coma-inducing monotone by Professor Binns, serves to ground students in political and cultural context. But no magical duel or potion catastrophe was ever mitigated by someone whispering, "Wait, Venus is rising!" The curriculum stands oddly skewed. Even Muggle studies, elective and scoffed at, seems more applicable in a world trying to bridge magical and non-magical spheres. In the Order of the Phoenix, students are seen panicking over astronomy OWLs. They take the exam on the tower, exposed to both examiners and Death Eaters. The moment is dramatic, but again, the stakes are about danger, not the subject. No spell's success hinges on whether one correctly identified Draco or Canis Major. When Professor Umbridge sends her goons to interfere, the resistance that unfolds is centered around loyalty, not the practical relevance of astronomy. The subject feels like set dressing, backdrop to rebellion, never the tool by which victory is won. Imagine a parallel. What if instead of astronomy, Hogwarts had made healing a core subject? Imagine if every wizarding child learned how to close a wound, detect a poison, or recognize the early signs of magical maladies. That would fit into the magical system's internal logic. Magic affects the body. Spells harm, potions heal, curses linger. But none of this foundational care is prioritized. Instead, students gaze at the sky. It is possible that astronomy serves as a support for astrological calculations, blending into divination. But even then, the books separate the two. Astrology is never shown being taught. Firenze, the centaur professor of divination, speaks of stars, but as omens, not as coordinates. The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs, he says, in order of the phoenix. He doesn't mention Professor Sinistra's star charts. The separation is clear. Astronomy is about facts. Divination is about dreams. But the dreamers affect the plot. The factual stargazers never do. The argument that astronomy remains for tradition's sake may hold weight. Hogwarts is ancient. Its founders likely believed in a system where celestial knowledge influenced earthly magic. Salazar Slytherin might have invoked the stars when choosing students. Rowena Ravenclaw, with her preference for wisdom, may have believed that knowledge of the heavens signaled an ordered mind. But what began as belief has ossified into obligation. And modern wizards, those like Harry, Ron, and even Hermione, are never shown benefiting from it. The most damning absence is any mention of the stars in duels, rituals, or spellbooks. In a universe so detailed that it includes wand flexibility and goblin-made armor, the omission is loud. Not once is it said that a hex is stronger under a certain constellation. The battle of the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix could have been a moment to link cosmic forces to magic. The Hall of Prophecy is nearby, after all. But no, wands flash, spells fly, and the stars remain irrelevant. There's a deep irony in the Department of Mysteries containing a space-themed room with rotating planets where gravity behaves erratically. That room, filled with silent orbs, suggests a connection between space and magic, but the books never explain it. Harry's group enters, a spell is cast, the room is abandoned, the link is never explored, a tantalizing mystery left untouched, like the subject itself. Astronomy, then, seems to operate outside the system of magical cause and effect. It does not inform spell work, alter potion effects, or impact magical creatures. Hagrid never consults a star chart before teaching about hippogriffs. McGonagall never aligns transfiguration lessons with planetary cycles. Snape does not scowl over lunar phases before brewing wolfsbane. And yet, astronomy persists. The only practical application, faint as it is, may be in navigation. Our wizards travel, they fly, they use enchanted maps, perhaps knowing the stars helps. But even that is thin. Wizards apparate, use portkeys. They rarely look up. The stars are not their guides. Magic is. So why teach it? Why insist upon it, examinate it, embed it in the bones of a magical school? Is it an error, an oversight by the author? Or is it a deliberate inclusion, a nod to the human tendency to wrap science in myth, to pretend that knowledge of the heavens grants us power over ourselves? The truth may lie not in the stars, but in the tone. Hogwarts is a romantic place. It clings to candlelight and ghosts, quills and enchanted ceilings. It teaches subjects for their beauty as much as for their utility. Astronomy, in that light, is a remnant of the age when knowledge of the stars felt like mastery over fate. That feeling remains, even if the magic has moved on. And so the students climb the tower. They squint at constellations and ink cold-numbed fingers across parchment. They chart the heavens with no promise of relevance, no hint that their spellwork will ever depend on Sirius rising or Jupiter aligning. They do it because it's required, because Hogwarts tells them to, because sometimes magic teaches us not what works, but what once mattered. And perhaps for Hogwarts, that's enough. Number 21. Why can't Muggles defend themselves against magic? Of all the quiet enigmas in the wizarding world, perhaps the most disturbing is the imbalance between magical and non-magical societies. The moment one begins to seriously consider the rules of magic and its protections, a troubling realization surfaces: Muggles are entirely, irreparably vulnerable. In a world where a single wand flick can bring down buildings, erase memories, or even kill without leaving a trace, why is it that Muggles, equipped with surveillance drones, infrared systems, satellites, radar, and artificial intelligence, have never developed even a rudimentary defense against magic? Worse still, the very idea of such a defense seems absent from magical discourse, as if the question itself were taboo. The wizarding world has demonstrated time and again its capacity for defensive magic. Hogwarts, for instance, is protected by spells so powerful that even you-know-who couldn't break through them, as Professor McGonagall notes in Deathly Hallows. The castle is unplottable, invisible to Muggles, and layered with dozens of enchantments to repel, confuse, and mislead intruders. Gringotts Bank uses cart-repelling spells, dragons, and enchantments that detect deception. Even mundane homes, like the Burrow, are fortified with protective charms. When the Weasleys fear Death Eaters, they don't run, they layer their home with wards. Yet nowhere in the canon do we see any suggestion that Muggles even suspect such protections exist, let alone attempt to replicate them. Their governments remain unaware, their armies unprepared. In Order of the Phoenix, Kingsley Shacklebolt works as a Muggle Prime Minister's secretary, a position that would seem ideal for fostering magical cooperation, but it's merely a cover. There's no hint of collaboration between magical and Muggle institutions in terms of national defense. The Statute of Secrecy has not only isolated wizardkind, it has also condemned Muggles to ignorance. One might argue that magic is inherently unknowable to non-magical people, but that fails to account for technology's exponential growth. Consider, if a thermal sensor can detect the body heat of a hiding wizard, and a sound-based detector can sense wand movement or muttered incantations, surely some form of protective measure could be developed. The Muggle world has drones that scan entire cities, biometric sensors that unlock doors, face recognition systems that can identify criminals from grainy footage. Yet all of this is useless against even a single disillusionment charm. It is not just defensive magic that Muggles are blind to. Offensive magic, too, operates outside their grasp. In Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, demonstrates the 3 unforgivable curses to a classroom of students. The killing curse, he explains, is unblockable. There's no counter-curse, there's no blocking it. Only one known person has ever survived it, and he's sitting right in front of me. This is not a weapon, it is annihilation incarnate. No Muggle tank, missile, or bomb comes close in terms of precision and lethality, and it is wielded by anyone sufficiently trained. One can only imagine what would happen if a wizard like Bellatrix Lestrange were to apparate into a major Muggle city. With a few well-placed curses, she could bring a hospital to its knees, disable an entire police department, or collapse a bridge, and no one would be able to trace it. No fingerprints, no witnesses, because memory charms are freely used, as seen repeatedly by obliviators like those sent to clean up after Arthur Weasley's car crash in Chamber of Secrets. Where, then, is the balance? The wizarding world insists on hiding itself, claiming it is for the Muggles' own good, but hiding is not the same as helping. What if a rogue wizard chose not to hide? In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says Lord Voldemort has never wanted to conquer the Muggle world. He wants to destroy it. This is a chilling thought. It implies that had Voldemort not been obsessed with magical bloodlines and control over wizardkind, he could have directed his efforts toward mass destruction, and Muggles could have done nothing. Even during the Second Wizarding War, the Muggle world seems entirely oblivious Death Eaters are flying across England, attacking bridges, killing innocents, and no Muggle authorities are mentioned as responding. In Half-Blood Prince, the Brockdale Bridge collapses. The news blames high winds and structural failure, but we, the readers, know better. It was an act of terror, of magic. Imagine if a non-magical country experienced such events. National security would be on high alert. Satellites would be tasked with surveillance. Civil engineers would review blueprints for sabotage. None of this happens in Rowling's world. What makes this worse is the sheer scale of magical concealment. The Ministry of Magic has entire departments dedicated to hiding magical events from Muggle eyes. Obliviators work tirelessly to remove memories, cover up incidents, and spin false narratives. Arthur Weasley, when discussing his fascination with Muggles, notes that they're clever, cleverer than they think. But this admiration is condescending. Muggles may be clever, but they are also shackled by ignorance. Take the example of the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. A full-scale magical battle occurs beneath the very city of London. Spells ricochet off walls, time-turners are destroyed, and death ensues. But above ground, Muggles go about their lives, unaware that reality was nearly rewritten. Is this responsible governance, or is it paternalistic arrogance? The possibility of Muggle protection against magic is never entertained, even theoretically. One could imagine a group of scientists working to analyze energy pulses from wand movements or experimenting with acoustic sensors to detect spellcasting. One could imagine reinforced bunkers shielded against magical intrusion, but such things do not exist, and if they did, the magical world would likely destroy them before they spread. Wizards, it seems, are not merely hidden, they are unchallengeable. The imbalance is total. A witch, like Hermione Granger, brilliant and disciplined, could disable half a city's power grid with a single incantation, reducto, and no one would stop her. And yet she walks through Muggle London unnoticed, unseen, untouchable. This isn't equality, it's not even Cold War, it's domination under a veil of secrecy. Even magical beings recognize this imbalance. In Goblet of Fire, the centaur Firenze says, "The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs. I hope this is one of those times." The centaurs distrust wizards, not because they are cruel, but because they hold too much power and wield it selectively. If magical beings feel threatened by wizards, what hope do Muggles have? Why then has no Muggle ever developed even a basic magical alarm system? Why are there no legends of Muggles creating counterspells or anti-wizard talismans, even if they don't understand how they work? In a world filled with magical creatures, enchanted objects, and ancient runes, is it truly impossible that Muggles might have stumbled upon something? Or were all such efforts erased? It is worth noting that magical folk often belittle Muggle creativity. Lucius Malfoy sneers at Arthur Weasley's fascination with electricity. Cornelius Fudge refers to Muggles as them, not us. The Daily Prophet rarely discusses Muggles except in the context of ridicule or pity. This cultural superiority surely contributes to the lack of integration between worlds. Wizards don't just hide from Muggles, they consider them beneath notice. There is also the fact that wizards enforce this imbalance through violence. In Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore's army is discovered, Dolores Umbridge threatens to use the Cruciatus Curse on students. She believes torture is justified to maintain control. If such behavior is acceptable within Hogwarts, what might magical governments do to a Muggle who invents a spell detection drone? The absence of Muggle defenses isn't just a narrative oversight, it's a systemic flaw, one that reveals the fragility of the world Rowling built. The Statute of Secrecy intended to protect Muggles from wizards has instead left them helpless. One rogue wand, one determined wizard, and a city burns. And there is no ministry to call, no spell detection alarm, no magical SWAT team to respond. When Harry uses the Patronus charm as a minor to defend Dudley from Dementors in Order of the Phoenix, he nearly faces expulsion, but no one asks why Dementors were in a Muggle neighborhood. No one addresses the broader danger. The system isn't designed to protect, it's designed to obscure. A single passage in Deathly Hallows reveals just how fragile this veil is. When the taboo curse on Voldemort's name activates, it allows Death Eaters to instantly locate anyone who speaks it. Imagine if Muggles had such a tracking mechanism for spell usage. Imagine if a single spell triggered alarms alerting the military or law enforcement. But Muggles don't have that. They aren't even allowed to know it exists. The wizarding world operates like a god among ants, claiming benevolence but practicing indifference. Wizards do not rule Muggles, not because they couldn't, but because they find the idea distasteful. Yet in doing so, they've created a powder keg. One miscast spell, one unstable wizard, and Muggles will have no recourse, no defense, no retaliation. They are passengers in a world they cannot see. Even more chilling is the idea that this vulnerability is intentional. Wizards may justify their secrecy as mercy, but in truth, it consolidates power. It creates a society where one side holds all the cards and the other doesn't even know a game is being played. If wizards truly believed in equality, they would teach Muggles how to recognize magical danger. They would offer protections, share defenses, or at least warn them of threats. Instead, they offer silence. And silence, as history has shown, is rarely innocent. Number 22. How does magical energy work? Magic in the wizarding world has always appeared as an elegant, almost effortless dance of words and wands. From the first time Harry Potter picks up his holy wand in Philosopher's Stone to the fierce battle in the Department of Mysteries, magic flows like a natural extension of the body. It is thrown, conjured, shaped, and shielded without the characters ever stopping to question a fundamental mystery. Where does this energy come from? What fuels it? Why does it not seem to ever run out? In the Muggle world, everything obeys the laws of energy. Light bulbs need electricity, cars need fuel, athletes, even the most elite, must rest. But wizards seem to draw on an invisible, unexplained reservoir of power. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall animates an entire platoon of stone knights. Harry casts multiple defensive charms in rapid succession. Voldemort unleashes bursts of fatal magic. No one stops to catch their breath. No one appears drained, physically or mentally. The concept of magical fatigue is glaringly absent. Yet in a few rare instances we see traces, faint, fleeting, of what might be exhaustion. In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore, after his breathtaking duel with Voldemort, is described as having lines etched deeper than ever into his face. Was that age, or a trace of magical fatigue? The book doesn't clarify. In fact, it retreats from the subject altogether. Throughout 7 books and countless spells later, we are left with a haunting silence around the mechanics of magical stamina. Hermione Granger, a Muggle-born and therefore someone who might be expected to raise scientific questions, never once questions this. She brews potions late into the night, studies advanced spell work far beyond her year, attends classes in multiple timelines using a time turner, and still manages to look composed. There is no mention of her magical reserves depleting. In any real-world scenario, her body and mind should have collapsed under the pressure, but in Rowling's world, mental willpower seems to be all it takes to function. Consider the Triwizard Tournament. The third task in Goblet of Fire was a complex magical maze filled with enchantments, creatures, and mental illusions. Harry, after surviving dragons, underwater perils, and a deadly portkey, still has enough strength to duel Voldemort and escape. There is no mention of trembling hands, foggy mind, or fading spell strength. He duels with crisp, exacting precision, even as grief and shock cloud his heart. This portrayal creates a troubling expectation that a wizard's magical capacity is infinite or worse, irrelevant. In the Muggle world, effort has weight, a pianist's fingers cramp, a programmer's eyes blur. But in Hogwarts, magic is treated as a tap that never runs dry. This illusion becomes particularly strange in high-stakes moments. During the fight at Malfoy Manor, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Bellatrix, and others are casting repeatedly, deflecting, summoning, shielding, screaming incantations like automatons. One would expect that the human body, even if not affected by magical limits, would show signs of adrenaline crashes, migraines, something. But there is nothing, only the drama of spellfire. Even Severus Snape, a wizard of incredible complexity and internal struggle, shows no indication of magical drain. In Half-Blood Prince, he fends off Harry's attacks effortlessly, while lecturing him at the same time. Blocked again and again and again until you learn to keep your mouth shut and your mind closed, he snaps. Snape doesn't even breathe heavily. If magical output had a cost, wouldn't this be the moment to show it? A flicker of strain in his hand, perhaps? A wince behind his sneer? Perhaps the most perplexing example is Bellatrix Lestrange. In Deathly Hallows, she duels Hermione, Ginny and Luna at once, while having just fought other Order members. Her fury is a force of nature, her spells deadly and fast. She is described as cackling madly and dodging spells with sinister grace. No signs of fatigue. Her magical power is seemingly fueled by pure malice and devotion to Voldemort. Is that how it works? Does emotion replace energy in this world? In contrast, Muggle-born students must come to Hogwarts with assumptions rooted in physics. Dean Thomas, who grew up with football and schoolwork, must have expected that doing something takes energy. Yet Dean never once expresses surprise at how endlessly spells can be cast. Neither does Hermione. Magic becomes a new default, one that oddly demands no nutritional support, no sleep adjustment, no rituals of magical recharge. Wizards skip breakfast and still duel. They endure sleepless nights, injuries and emotional breakdowns, and still perform complex charms. Even the use of unforgivable curses provides no insight into magical expenditure. When Harry uses the Cruciatus Curse on Amicus Caro in Deathly Hallows, it succeeds because of his emotional state. "You need to mean it, Potter," Bellatrix once said. "Does that mean magic is fueled by will, by emotion? And if so, does that emotion ever burn out? After endless grief, loss, fear, would a wizard eventually find their well of power dry?" The books never answer. Take the Patronus charm. It is said to require a powerful, happy memory. Lupin teaches Harry this early on. But what's more interesting is how easily Harry can summon it later, on command, in battle, repeatedly. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the effort to learn it is shown. But by order of the Phoenix, he produces one in front of an entire room of students without difficulty. His internal strength seems to replace the need for magical energy. Again, the implication is that emotion and will suffice. But if magic is purely emotional, why do some witches and wizards fail at it despite strong feelings? Neville Longbottom, with immense motivation and a loyal heart, struggles with magic for years. If willpower is the fuel, he should be bursting with it. Yet he's slow to progress until later years. Is there a biological factor? A genetic link? The books remain vague. No one speaks of magical capacity, or the equivalent of a mana pool. No one calculates magical consumption. It is either there or it isn't. Wandless magic, too, raises questions. Dumbledore conjures flames, shields, ropes, and more without uttering a word or lifting a wand. Is this a sign of greater energy, deeper connection, or just experience? In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's duel with Voldemort is described as spectacular. The atrium erupts with elemental forces. Water, fire, shattered glass, animated statues, magic in physical form. If ever there was a moment to hint at energetic cost, this was it. But instead, Dumbledore is calm and Voldemort flees in frustration. The house elves, like Dobby and Creature, add another layer of confusion. They perform powerful magic without wands, bypassing security, disappearing at will. Dobby disarms Lucius Malfoy with a snap of his fingers. Does their species have a different magical metabolism? Are they more efficient, or are they simply tapping into the same endless resource the wizards ignore? If so, why is their magic not more widely studied or taught? The mystery deepens. Time manipulation with the time turner should, theoretically, cause strain. Manipulating reality, reversing time, creating temporal echoes, surely that demands energy. Yet Hermione uses it daily for an entire school year. She never once collapses, she never forgets a class. If reality is being bent, wouldn't there be a toll? Or is the time turner simply a loophole, an object that draws power from elsewhere, a magical battery of sorts? The books never explore the idea. Even magical objects raise eyebrows. The sword of Gryffindor absorbs power. Horcruxes fracture souls and tether them to reality. Portkeys defy physics, yet no wizard seems wary of overuse. Magic is deployed like a casual tool. Repetition has no consequence. When Fred and George Weasley create enchanted fireworks in Order of the Phoenix, the castle is engulfed in a magical spectacle. There is no suggestion that their constant spellcrafting or experimentation ever drained them. Their creativity, not energy, seems to be the limit. Consider also the Room of Requirement. A magical space that reshapes itself constantly, holds massive items, creates objects, and even sustains armies. Who fuels that? Is the magic ancient? Does it have a limit? When Dumbledore's army trains there for weeks, casting spell after spell, we are never told if the room tires or if the students do. It's portrayed as a place of possibility, not constraint. Finally, the Horcrux destruction sequence offers another lost opportunity to explore magical exhaustion. Harry and his friends are on the run for months, without proper rest or nourishment. They duel, apparate, hide under enchantments, maintain protective charms. Surely their bodies must protest. And yet the narrative never emphasizes the weariness of magic itself. Physical hunger, yes. Cold and fear, yes. But not once does a spell fail because of magical depletion. Magic never flickers. This raises a disturbing implication that either magic truly is endless or that the books refuse to address its cost because it interferes with pace. If magic were a finite resource, characters might need to plan. They might conserve spells, ration energy. High-stakes battles might carry deeper risks. Instead, magic remains aesthetic, beautiful, violent, clever, but never tiring. It is as if wizards are vessels for a divine stream they never need to question, only channel. Yet wouldn't it make the world richer to admit limitation? To show Harry stumble, Hermione falter, Dumbledore pause, not out of grief or age, but from having truly given too much of themselves to the magic that defined their lives. In a world so intricately built, this silence around magical exhaustion feels like a missed opportunity, a hole in the enchantment, a shadow that makes us wonder if even magic has its price, and what it might cost when the well finally runs dry. Number 23. Why don't wizards use magic in science? In the wizarding world, time turners make the impossible possible. They allow wizards to relive hours, even days, folding time into loops that defy the very fabric of physical laws. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione uses such a device daily to attend multiple classes. This is no illusion or metaphor. It is literal time manipulation. And yet, not a single wizard stops to ask the most fundamental scientific questions. How does it work? What laws of the universe does it bend? Can the energy of the time turner be measured? There are no magical physicists, no experiments, no journals discussing temporal paradoxes. Instead, the Ministry of Magic locks away the devices in a dusty office and eventually loses them in the Department of Mysteries. For a society that bends time, they seem uninterested in understanding time. Consider the spells that levitate, accelerate, or immobilize objects. Wingardium Leviosa, Arresto Momentum, Locomotor. They alter gravity, inertia, and motion with a flick of a wand. But where is the magical equivalent of Newton? Where is the experiment that tests whether the mass of the object affects the levitation? In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Fleur Delacour casts a charm to lift her sister from the lake during the Triwizard Tournament. The spell works effortlessly even underwater, but no one investigates the mechanics. How do spells work differently underwater, air or fire? The scientific spirit of inquiry is absent. Magic is accepted, not explored. It is a tool, not a mystery, to be unravelled. Even magical healing, perhaps the most astonishing aspect of wizardry, is ruled by old books and folklore rather than clinical trials. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Professor Slughorn gives Ron a bezoar when he's poisoned, saying, "Just shove it down his throat." It works, but why? What is in the bezoar that binds or neutralizes poison? Could it be replicated synthetically? No one studies the chemical makeup, nor tries to improve it. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries appears more like a 19th century sanatorium than a cutting-edge institution. Wounds are healed with potions and charms, but there is no research into cellular regeneration or long-term effects. Wizards cure dragonpox, regrow bones, and mend slashed flesh, yet they do not publish studies, perform peer reviews, or challenge theories. Everything is anecdotal. Empirical knowledge does not exist. Potions, too, are trapped in tradition. Snape snarls at Harry about instructions in his old textbook. Add the crushed snake fangs, then stir counterclockwise until the potion turns green. If the Half-Blood Prince, who once owned the book, wrote marginalia that improved the recipes, yet even these improvements are personal and secretive. Brewing a potion is not treated as a chemical process to be optimized, but as a rigid formula to be memorized. Why isn't there a magical science journal where different brewers compare outcomes, refine methods, or question ingredients? Even Hermione, brilliant and analytical, never proposes standardizing potions with measurable ingredients and documented results. Potions are inherited, not developed. Wizards do not innovate, they repeat. The absence of magical scientific institutions is perhaps the most glaring gap. Where are the equivalents of CERN or MIT? The only research facility we glimpse is the Department of Mysteries, where knowledge is buried, not shared. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry enters rooms dedicated to love, time, thought, and death. But the research there is secretive and undefined. The unspeakables guard their work with obsessive silence. Why? In the Muggle world, science thrives through communication, challenge, and skepticism. Wizards, however, hoard knowledge. Even Dumbledore, the greatest mind of his age, never publishes his theories about death, hallows, or horcruxes. His discoveries die with him. In a world that can literally resurrect the dead, as Voldemort does using the most horrifying dark magic, there is no collective effort to understand life and death in metaphysical terms. Wizards accept power without asking why it works. Hogwarts itself discourages scientific thinking. Subjects are practical, focused on spellwork, potion-making, and magical creatures. There is no course equivalent to magical theory, logic, or experimentation. Students never learn the history of how spells were invented or what causes them to succeed or fail. The curriculum is rigid and repetitive, charms, transfiguration, herbology, year after year. Even in 6th year, the focus is on NEWT preparation, not innovation. No student is ever seen conducting an experiment, posing a hypothesis, or testing a variable. The closest is Fred and George, who treat magic like engineering, building inventions that surprise even seasoned aurors. But instead of being celebrated as pioneers, they are treated like pranksters. The only magical R&D comes from joke shops. Hermione Granger is perhaps the most tragic embodiment of this intellectual vacuum. She is methodical, studious, and curious, yet she never asks what magic is. She memorizes spells, but never analyzes them. She can produce a Patronus, brew polyjuice potion, and modify memory, yet she never wonders how it works or if there is a deeper order behind the chaos. In Deathly Hallows, she even destroys the Horcrux cup using a basilisk fang without once questioning the chemical interaction between fang and soul fragment. She trusts Dumbledore's wisdom, Harry's instincts, and old books, but she never asks if there is a better way, a clearer lens, a new perspective. Even more absurd is the magical world's complete disinterest in integrating Muggle science. Arthur Weasley is fascinated by electricity, rubber ducks, and batteries, but he is considered eccentric. No one else shows the slightest interest. Wizards ignore concepts like physics, biology, or engineering. The two worlds remain isolated not by law, but by willful ignorance. Wizards can fly, vanish, and talk to ghosts, yet they cannot build a computer, harness electricity, or send a signal across the planet. When Harry needs to talk to Sirius in Order of the Phoenix, he must sneak into Umbridge's office and use her fireplace. No one ever considers adapting Muggle communication methods. Why not enchant a mobile phone? Why not study radio waves and blend them with magic? Spell creation itself is an obscure art. Spells exist, but how are they invented? Who decides on the incantation, the wand movement, the magical intention? In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry uses Sectum Sempra, a spell created by Snape. But how did Snape invent it? Did he experiment? Did he fail? Was there a testing process? There are no spell patent offices, no development labs, no ethical boards. Spells can maim, kill, or control, and yet anyone can invent and use them without oversight. In the absence of magical ethics, how does society regulate invention? The answer is it doesn't. Magic develops in the dark, passed hand to hand like an old secret. Another curious absence is mathematics. Wizards don't study numbers. Arithmancy is a vague subject taught by Professor Vector, but we never see it used. Are there magical equations? Can spells be quantified? Could someone calculate the force of a stunning spell or the heat of fiend fire? When Dumbledore duels Voldemort in the Ministry Atrium, their power is extraordinary, but we have no language to measure it. Muggles measure power in volts, joules, and degrees. Wizards rely on awe. This is not knowledge, it's mythologizing. Even astronomy, a shared discipline between Muggle and magical worlds, is stripped of inquiry. Students observe the stars but do not interpret them. No one studies black holes, gravity wells, or cosmic magic. Centaurs believe the heavens tell the future, but wizards do not build telescopes or launch satellites. Magic might allow space travel or the manipulation of stellar energy, but the question is never raised. Science looks outward. Wizardry looks inward. The economic implications are also staggering. Magical transportation defies all infrastructure. Apparition, portkeys, flue powder, they render roads, trains, and even airplanes obsolete. Why hasn't this revolutionized commerce, migration, or urban planning? The night bus is the most advanced magical public transport, and it's chaotic and disorganized. There is no department of magical engineering to refine or regulate travel. Muggles build bullet trains, bridges, and tunnels. Wizards vanish and reappear, but never organize. Magic is personal, not institutional. Dark magic, too, suffers from lack of scrutiny. Horcruxes are the most taboo of magical constructs, but no one studies them to understand their structure or countermeasures. Dumbledore knows of them, but he relies on memory and myth. No wizard ever opens a Horcrux in a lab, examines its essence, or dissects its spellwork. The only way to destroy one is through something destructive enough to destroy the fragment of soul beyond repair. This is guesswork, not science. Wizards live in fear of things they refuse to study. That is not safety. It is superstition. Even the concept of magical creatures is underdeveloped. Hagrid teaches students about beasts, but there is no zoological institute, no biology department, no comparative anatomy of dragons and hippogriffs. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander catalogues creatures with passion and detail, but his work is the exception, not the rule. Most wizards fear or misuse magical creatures. They do not seek to understand them. Basilisks are bred in secret, acromantulas hunted in forests, dementors are employed as guards without ever being truly understood. Wizards do not ask why these creatures exist, what laws govern their abilities, or whether they are magical anomalies or natural evolutions. Wand law, the foundation of wizard spellcasting, is another field devoid of research. Ollivander is the only expert we meet, and even he admits the wand chooses the wizard. But what does that mean? Are wands sentient? How does core and wood affect spellcasting? Why do certain wand cores work better with specific spells? No one runs tests, charts results, or publishes findings. Wand law is more akin to alchemy than science, esoteric, mysterious, and unchallenged. Even the magical laws of energy are unclear. Do spells consume magical energy? Can wizards run out? Is magical ability inherited, learned, or a combination of both? We know squibs exist, filch, for example, but we do not know why. Is it genetic, environmental? Could it be treated or prevented? Wizards do not study magic as a field of energy like electricity or magnetism. They simply accept that some people have it and some do not. That is not knowledge, it is fatalism. The existence of magical bloodlines raises disturbing questions. Pure blood supremacy is rooted in the belief that magic is inherited. But is it? No one conducts genetic research, no one maps magical DNA. Muggleborns exist, proving that magic can arise spontaneously. But why? What activates the spark? What role do emotions, trauma, or willpower play in magical emergence? Wizards never ask. They fear what science might reveal. Better to keep power in old books and ancient families. Finally, the greatest tragedy is that the wizarding world, for all its wonder, has stagnated. The same spells are taught, the same curses feared, the same institutions obeyed. Hogwarts, founded 1,000 years ago, still dominates education. The ministry still governs without transparency. Progress is not desired. Innovation is distrusted. The magical world exists in a bubble of eternal tradition, where knowledge is revered but never expanded. And that is perhaps the most illogical thing of all. For a world built on magic, it fears the magic of discovery. Number 24. Why aren't special magical abilities registered? Of all the curious inconsistencies in the magical world, few are as glaring and as dangerously overlooked as the lack of mandatory registration for specialized magical abilities. A world governed by spells, charms, and centuries-old traditions somehow allows individuals to walk freely with the power to read minds, morph into animals, or speak the language of serpents without any formal documentation or supervision. This is not only puzzling but poses a serious risk to the safety and integrity of wizarding society. Take the example of animagi, wizards and witches who can transform into animals at will. This is not some school-level trick like transfiguring a teacup into a mouse. It's an advanced and potentially subversive skill. Animagus transformation can be used for surveillance, evasion, or deceit. And yet registration with the Ministry of Magic is entirely optional. The laws state that animagi must register, but the enforcement is laughable. Rita Skeeter operated as an illegal animagus, a beetle, for years, invading private conversations and publishing scandalous stories without consent. She sat on window ledges, crawled into bags, and recorded secrets that tore apart reputations. Her eventual punishment, a brief career hiatus coerced by Hermione Granger. The ministry never intervened. Even more alarming is the fact that this wasn't an isolated case. The marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, were all unregistered animagi, and they acquired the skill while still in school. The three of them regularly broke school rules, wandered around as animals, and helped their friend Remus Lupin manage his lycanthropy in secret. This not only evaded adult supervision, but directly undermined the very laws designed to prevent magical misuse. And yet, no one at the ministry seemed to know or care. How is it that three teenagers mastered a complex magical ability without triggering any institutional response? The case of Sirius Black takes this oversight to a more dangerous level. He was able to escape from Azkaban, a prison believed to be inescapable, by transforming into a dog. The Dementors couldn't sense him in his animagus form, which allowed him to slip through the bars and swim to the mainland. The ministry, in all its self-assured bureaucracy, had no fail-safe, no registry, no way of anticipating such an escape, because they didn't even know he had that ability. This was a man convicted of murdering 13 people with a single curse, and no one thought to consider the full extent of his magical arsenal. Then there is the world of mental magic, equally powerful and even more insidious. Legilimency, the ability to delve into another person's thoughts and emotions, is perhaps one of the most dangerous abilities in existence. In the wrong hands, it becomes a tool for psychological manipulation, espionage, or blackmail. And yet, just like with animagi, there is no official registration, no testing, no records. Severus Snape was a master legilimens, able to peer into Harry's mind during occlumency lessons. Albus Dumbledore himself could perform legilimency, often understanding people before they even spoke. Both men used it for arguably noble reasons, but the potential for misuse is staggering. Consider the implications in a court of law. A skilled legilimens could extract confessions without consent, or worse, manipulate memories to suit their narrative. We know that memories can be tampered with. Slughorn's altered recollection of Tom Riddle is proof enough. If memories can be modified and minds can be read, what does this say about justice in the magical world? Where are the protocols to ensure that trials and interrogations are not influenced by unregistered mental intrusions? Occlumency, the counter to legilimency, is another unregulated skill. It allows a person to shield their thoughts, lie without detection, and resist magical intrusions. This power becomes critically important in political or criminal environments. Tom Riddle, even as a student, used occlumency to mask his intentions and manipulate others. It allowed him to charm his professors, commit murders, and eventually become Lord Voldemort without raising suspicion. If there had been any effort to monitor the teaching or practice of occlumency, perhaps some red flags would have appeared earlier in his life. The absence of regulation becomes even more concerning when one considers Parselmouths, those who can speak Parseltongue, the language of snakes. It's a rare ability, often associated with dark wizards, most famously with Salazar Slytherin and Lord Voldemort. Yet again, there is no registry, no magical census to track who possesses this gift. Harry Potter discovered he could speak Parseltongue after an incident at the zoo and later during his second year at Hogwarts. The Ministry never reached out, never investigated, never even asked how this ability could have resurfaced in a boy believed to be Voldemort's vanquisher. Even when the ability became public knowledge during the Chamber of Secrets crisis, the response was gossip, suspicion, and prejudice, but no official protocol. No auras came knocking, no Department of Magical Abilities examined him. The only thing Harry got was fearful looks and whispers from his classmates. How does a society that values secrecy and security so much remain indifferent to the appearance of an ability last publicly known in the darkest wizard of their time? Let's look at the broader implications. In a world where a person can transfigure objects, cast deadly spells, or erase someone's memory with a flick of a wand, it's bizarre that the abilities most vulnerable to stealth and abuse remain untracked. A person who learns the killing curse will end up under watch. But someone who can transform into a falcon, perch on a windowsill and listen to ministry secrets, no one bats an eye. The danger doesn't come from the flashiest magic. It comes from the subtle, the quiet, the unseen, and the system isn't prepared for it. In the Goblet of Fire, when the Triwizard Tournament is being organized, the Ministry sends dozens of officials to monitor security. Dragons are imported under strict supervision. Maze enchantments are tested. And yet, within the same book, Barty Crouch Jr. impersonates Mad-Eye Moody for nearly an entire year using Polyjuice Potion. He manipulates the events of the tournament, endangers students, and revives Voldemort. How did no one question his knowledge of legilimency or occlumency, skills he used liberally? The answer is chilling in its simplicity: no one was monitoring. There is also the disturbing fact that these abilities are teachable. Animagus transformation is incredibly complex, but not impossible. Legilimency and occlumency can be taught, as seen in the occlumency lessons between Snape and Harry. If a society allows the teaching of these dangerous arts, how can it not implement a mechanism to ensure they are not used for harm? Surely the moment someone learns to breach another's mind or assume an animal form or speak with serpents, there should be an oath, a license, or at the very least, a magical contract on file. The ministry requires licenses for apparition. Why not for these? The Department of Magical Law Enforcement, which includes the Aura Office, does a thorough job investigating curses, jinxes, and unforgivable spells. Yet it completely neglects the most deceptive forms of magic, those that do not leave traces. This leaves a wide-open door for misuse, especially among the ambitious or the corrupt. Think of Dolores Umbridge, a woman in power, vindictive and secretive. If she had been a skilled occlumens, she could have lied under veritaserum. If she had been a legilimens, she could have read the thoughts of every student at Hogwarts during her cruel reign. Nothing in the book suggests she had those powers, but the mere possibility is terrifying because there would be no way to prove it. Wizards like Gellert Grindelwald and Lord Voldemort mastered multiple, advanced magical disciplines, including mind magic. It's no accident that their rise to power was built on deception, manipulation, and secrecy. They didn't just use brute force, they used subtlety, they got into people's heads. And no one in the ministry seems to have thought that perhaps controlling and monitoring these disciplines might have helped prevent another dark age. In fact, during the height of the war against Voldemort, the Order of the Phoenix depended heavily on occlumency and secrecy. Snape's double life was only possible because of his mental shielding, and yet this very method of resistance, so essential, so dangerous in the wrong hands, was never formalized or regulated. Who decides? Who gets to learn occlumency? Who oversees the teachers? Where are the laws? Perhaps the reason lies in the nature of magical governance. The Ministry of Magic is riddled with inefficiencies, bias, and political agendas. They spend more time covering scandals than preventing them. The case of Sturgis Podmore, imprisoned for simply being under the Imperious Curse, shows how little the ministry understands, or wants to understand, the nuances of magical influence. If they can't tell the difference between guilt and coercion, how can they be trusted to regulate complex magical talents? The lack of registration also allows for generational privilege. Families like the Blacks, the Malfoys, and the Lestranges often possess rare magical knowledge handed down through generations. If registration were mandatory, it would level the playing field. But that might threaten the old bloodlines. If the ministry implemented a formal system, it would force these families to expose their hidden abilities and perhaps their crimes. There's an unspoken fear in the wizarding world of over-regulation, of turning magic into bureaucracy. But the cost of this leniency is too high. The magical community pays in lives, in broken trust, in preventable disasters. And while the ministry excels at reacting, sending dementors after escaped prisoners, deploying task forces after crimes, it fails entirely at preventing the misuse of specialized magic. The irony is that the magical world is so concerned with secrecy from muggles that it forgets to safeguard itself from within. It places wards over entire villages but lets mind readers roam freely. It builds prisons with soul-sucking guards but never verifies whether inmates have magical skills that allow escape. It insists on the secrecy of wands but allows the most intimate of powers to go unchecked. This isn't just a flaw in policy, it's a flaw in philosophy. The magical world treats rare abilities as curiosities rather than threats. It romanticizes them in books, whispers about them in corridors, but does nothing to ensure they are used ethically. It's a world built on wonder, yes, but also on the dangerous assumption that everyone who holds power will use it wisely. And history has proven time and again that this is a deadly mistake. Number 25. Why don't half-bloods learn in both worlds? The summer air was heavy with the scent of mown grass and warm pavement when young Dean Thomas received his Hogwarts letter. He was watching a football match on television with his stepfather halfway through a chocolate biscuit when the owl tapped against the window pane. His mother screamed, and Dean thought for a moment that someone had thrown a brick through the glass. That moment marked the end of his ordinary life. and the beginning of a strange fracture that would never fully heal, because what the letter did not include, what no Hogwarts letter ever did, was an invitation to continue living between two worlds. It only offered escape. The price was subtle but steep, complete immersion in a hidden realm and gradual separation from everything that had once made him ordinary. Dean was a Muggle born in practice, though technically a half-blood. His biological father had vanished before he could walk, and the truth of his magical heritage was unknown even to him for years. But even those children raised with some knowledge of the magical world, like Seamus Finnegan, whose mother was a witch and father a Muggle, were swept into Hogwarts' fold and never truly educated in how to bridge both parts of themselves. The education at Hogwarts, despite its ancient traditions and formidable magic, lacked the one thing half-blood children needed most, the acknowledgement of their dual nature. There were no classes on Muggle politics, no explorations of the ethical implications of magical secrecy, no requirement to maintain basic Muggle skills like math, history, or writing essays on a computer. Instead, the magical curriculum assumed a severance. "You're a wizard, Harry," said Hagrid, a line that millions remember. But what he did not say was, "And you'll now live in a world that pretends the rest of your life never existed." That sentiment is never spoken, but deeply implied in every inch of the system. Hogwarts itself seemed determined to isolate. Its location was secret, its communication by owl or enchanted mirror. There were no summer homework assignments that required research in a Muggle library. No partnerships with Muggle institutions. Even the famed Muggle Studies class designed to educate purebloods about the non-magical world was a superficial and often patronizing overview that only reinforced stereotypes. As Hermione Granger once explained, it's not a required subject for anyone, not even for those who came from Muggle backgrounds themselves. The most striking irony is that the very children most capable of becoming bridges between worlds were denied the tools to do so. Take Lily Evans, for example. Born to Muggle parents, raised in an ordinary neighborhood, she had a brilliant intellect and unshakable sense of justice. She learned potion-making, dueling, and advanced charms. Yet when she married James Potter and joined the Order of the Phoenix, she did so as a witch alone. The Muggle world did not enter the fight against Voldemort. There was no alliance, no attempt to integrate forces, even when the magical world stood on the brink of collapse. Lily could have been the perfect liaison between realms, but Hogwarts never trained her for that task. Her sister, Petunia Dursley, is often ridiculed in the narrative for her bitterness, but what if part of that bitterness came not from jealousy but from abandonment? Her sister entered a world she could not follow, never truly returned, and built a life shrouded in mystery and silence. Petunia's rage may have been grief in disguise. In the system that governs magical education, a non-magical sibling becomes irrelevant. There are no letters for them, no open doors, just the echo of an owl's wings retreating into the sky. Imagine a different system, one in which Seamus Finnegan was allowed to take correspondence courses in Muggle history while learning magical defense, where half-bloods received internships in both Gringotts and a Muggle bank, where, instead of severing the two identities, Hogwarts forged a path that acknowledged and celebrated them both. But the reality was a system that prepared children only for magical careers, auror, healer, magical law enforcement. There was no mention of being an ambassador, no curriculum that taught negotiation between magical and non-magical governments. Wizards preferred to stay hidden, even if it meant ignorance. This isolationist mindset is embedded even in the Ministry of Magic. Arthur Weasley, despite his fascination with Muggle technology, works in a department literally called the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office. His role is to retrieve enchanted objects that have leaked into the Muggle world. The assumption is not collaboration, but containment. It's telling that Arthur's own children, despite growing up with him as a model of Muggle interest, know almost nothing about the world he studies. Ron Weasley is baffled by telephones and plugs. "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" Arthur once asked, revealing both his affection and ignorance. But why was there no official training to bridge that gap? Hermione Granger, born to Muggle dentists, is perhaps the most obvious example of this dual potential. She arrives at Hogwarts with a deep love of reading, logical thinking, and social responsibility. Yet even she, the brightest witch of her age, loses touch with her parents by the final books. She modifies their memories, sends them to Australia, cuts ties completely. The act is presented as one of noble protection, and it is, but also of inevitability. Hermione must shed her Muggle life to survive in the magical war. The system leaves her no choice. It is also worth noting that this trend continues even into adulthood. None of the major magical institutions show interest in the Muggle world beyond regulation. Gringotts does not offer Muggle currency exchange. St. Mungo's does not admit non-magical patients, even if their child is magical. The Department of Magical Transportation does not coordinate with the Muggle Transportation Ministry, despite the dangers of apparition accidents. The secrecy is so complete, so all-consuming, that even in emergencies, the magical world looks inward rather than outward. The Triwizard Tournament, a moment of rare international magical cooperation, is often celebrated. But even then, the idea of involving non-magical spectators is unthinkable. The Quidditch World Cup, with its enchanted stadium and obliviator squads, is a spectacle hidden in plain sight. Again, the emphasis is not on understanding, but concealment. Wizards must enjoy their culture quietly in shadows and erase all traces before the Muggles notice. One might argue that this secrecy is necessary for safety, for stability, but this only underlines the urgency of education. If half-blood children were trained to navigate both societies, they could help build safer structures of contact. Imagine a world where magical children learned cybersecurity, Muggle medicine, or international diplomacy alongside spells and transfiguration. The potential for progress, for healing the divide, is enormous, but the magical system as it exists fears such contact. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter himself becomes the figure of frustration. Isolated, angry, desperate for guidance, he tells Dumbledore, "I want to talk to someone who's actually been through this." He's not asking for another spell. He's asking for empathy, for understanding. In that moment, what Harry lacks is not magical power. It's a framework for processing reality, a bridge between his trauma and his identity. That bridge could have existed if his education had not cut him off from half of himself. Even practical matters are ignored. Magical children never learn to drive, pay taxes, or apply for a job in the non-magical world. What happens to squibs born to magical families? They are often cast out, like Arabella Figg, relegated to the margins of both societies. Filch, too, is a squib, bitter, broken, and mocked. Why is there no official program to support those who straddle the line? Why are bridges not built for them as well? The final battle at Hogwarts, chaotic, bloody and tragic, involved no Muggle intervention. No outside help, no ambulances, no press. The magical world fought and bled alone, and yet, in the aftermath, they returned to the same structures, rebuilt the same school, reinstated the same rules. There was no sign of structural reform, no hint that Hogwarts would evolve to reflect the diversity of its students' origins. And so the cycle continues. Children like Dean, Seamus, and Hermione arrive at platform 9 3/4, filled with awe. They board the train, learn the spells, pass the tests, but slowly, imperceptibly, they drift from their old lives. The magical world does not demand that they forget, but it does not help them remember either. It lets them fade, and in doing so, it loses the one thing it desperately needs: connection. A new vision of magical education is long overdue, one that sees half-bloods not as anomalies but as assets, not as divided but as uniquely equipped to unify. If the magical world truly wishes to survive, to thrive, It must learn not only to protect its secrets, but to prepare its children to live in both light and shadow. Magic should not be a wall. It should be a bridge. Number 26. How does magical intuition work? Of all the enchantments and incantations within the world of Harry Potter, one of the most mysterious elements is never spoken aloud in a spell, never taught in a classroom, and never explained in any textbook: magical intuition. It hovers like a ghost between the lines of Rowling's text, rarely questioned, often convenient, and occasionally maddening. What exactly is happening when Harry suddenly feels something is wrong, or when Dumbledore silently perceives danger without so much as a whispered word? If magic is a system with rules, then where does this instinct fit in? Harry's connection to magical objects is often brushed off as a result of his bond with Voldemort, but there are moments that stretch beyond that explanation. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he walks into the cave where a Horcrux is hidden and is immediately struck by an overwhelming sense of dread. The place was, somehow, deeply unwelcoming, Rowling writes. It is not a spell or charm that alerts him, it is a sensation. This feeling that washes over him is not tied to a spell or visible danger. It's atmospheric, intuitive, and it guides the behavior of both Harry and Dumbledore throughout the entire scene. But is this truly a magical sense or a narrative shortcut? Dumbledore's intuition is perhaps the most supernatural of all. His knowledge of what's happening around him borders on omniscience. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry is dragged into the Forbidden Forest and nearly attacked by centaurs, Dumbledore appears at exactly the right moment. No one had told him. No spell had been used to contact him. It was as though he simply knew. Later, in the Department of Mysteries, Dumbledore again arrives precisely when Voldemort flees Harry's body. There is no logical explanation for how he tracks these events. Is he simply that powerful, or does the magical world contain an invisible radar that only a few can tune into? Voldemort's connection to his Horcruxes offers a clue, but also a contradiction. In Deathly Hallows, Voldemort knew the wand had been taken. He felt it. The Elder Wand, stolen from his fallen enemy, resonated through his very core. This would suggest that objects of intense magical power emit signals, vibrations of a sort, that their creators or bonded owners can perceive. Yet this sense is inconsistent. He does not know when other Horcruxes are destroyed. He is unaware when Harry is standing in front of one at Grimmauld Place, or when the locket is taken from Umbridge. If the connection is strong enough to feel the wand's theft, why not the destruction of his soul? The concept of sensing magic is present even in Hermione, the most rule-bound and academic of the trio. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry opens the golden egg underwater, the strange melody gives him more than information. It gives him a feeling. Hermione is the first to call it a magical clue, suggesting that even sounds can carry magical properties. But again, there is no spell taught at Hogwarts that helps students interpret this kind of non-verbal emotional resonance. It is assumed that some people simply feel magic more deeply than others. But why? This phenomenon grows even stranger in the case of Luna Lovegood. Her entire perception of the world seems guided by an internal compass that no one else possesses. She talks of thestrals long before most students have even acknowledged their presence. In Order of the Phoenix, she is the only one who knows how to reach the Room of Requirement without being told. Luna doesn't learn these things through books, she feels them. Her magical sensitivity is so pronounced, it seems like a sixth sense. Yet again, the series never explains whether this ability is rare, learnable, or inherent. If this magical radar truly exists, why is it not taught? Hogwarts, for all its traditions and magical expertise, does not appear to have a single class dedicated to the interpretation of magical instinct. There is divination, of course, but even within the books, divination is often dismissed as vague nonsense. Trelawney's prophecies, when they are real, do not seem to be taught, controlled, or replicated. They just happen. And yet in the heat of real danger, instinct is what keeps Harry alive more often than any spell. The educational system of magic ignores this entirely, focusing instead on rote learning and wand technique. Why? Perhaps it is not something that can be taught, but that raises further problems. If magical intuition is innate, why do we not see more characters using it consistently? Why does it fail when the story requires suspense? No one senses Peter Pettigrew lurking in the castle as Ron's pet. No one notices that Moody is actually Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise for nearly an entire year. Dumbledore, with all his powers of perception, fails to foresee his own poisoning. Are we to believe that this instinct switches on and off arbitrarily? Snape, too, is an example of inconsistent perception. His mastery of occlumency and legilimency suggests a deep attunement to magical energy. Yet he fails to detect Voldemort's manipulations within Harry. He also fails to sense the brewing betrayal of the Carrows in Deathly Hallows. His fate is sealed in a shack beside the Shrieking Shack, murdered by the very man he served for years, and never once does his instinct seem to warn him. For all his precision, Snape is as blind as any Muggle in that final moment. Why does magical intuition desert him? The inconsistency grows more curious when we examine how magic itself behaves. Spells seem to carry memory, wands have preferences, objects resist or accept users based on personality. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry pulls the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat because he has proven himself a true Gryffindor. This is not spellcraft, it is moral alignment. How does the hat know he is worthy? How does the sword know to appear? This is magic responding to unspoken truth. It's intuition not from the wizard, but from magic itself. Magical creatures add another layer to this enigma. Hippogriffs react to respect. Thestrals can only be seen by those who have seen death. Phoenixes appear in moments of loyalty. These creatures are not enchanted, they are enchanted. Their very existence implies that the magical world responds emotionally as much as it does logically. They are mirrors for the emotional state of the wizard interacting with them. This kind of response cannot be explained by any known spell or hex. The Mirror of Erised operates on the same principle. It reveals not what is logical, but what is longed for. It is not cast with a charm, it simply is, and again, it is Dumbledore who understands it without ever needing to study it. His understanding of magical objects seems to come not from knowledge, but from awareness. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, he says, indicating an understanding that is philosophical as well as magical. But where did he learn this? Characters like Professor Trelawney offer a glimpse into what happens when magical intuition becomes unstable. Her random, drunken prophecies are rarely taken seriously until one comes true. She does not understand her own power. It leaks out of her at odd intervals, uncontrolled, unpredictable. But even this is a form of magical perception. It is real. Why does no one help her harness it? Then there are the house elves. Dobby, in particular, senses danger long before it comes. In Chamber of Secrets, he warns Harry of plots and deaths, not because he read a letter, but because he felt the evil inside the castle. House elves use a different kind of magic altogether, often wandless, often emotionally driven. Yet their emotional perception is sharper than most wizards. Why are they never studied for this trait? When magic itself can choose users, as in the case of the Elder Wand or the Sorting Hat, it becomes hard to argue that intuition is not part of its fabric. These decisions are not made through logical evaluation. They are made through understanding essence, something that resembles empathy more than calculation. It is a form of knowing without being told. So why are its practitioners so often unaware? Harry's own development offers a final paradox. His ability to sense Horcruxes, feel Voldemort's presence, and interpret magical spaces grows stronger over time. But it is never trained. It happens in moments of high emotion, When he is calm, he learns nothing. When he is angry, grieving, or afraid, the world reveals itself. This suggests that emotion, not reason, is the key to magical perception. But emotion is the very thing Hogwarts warns students to control. If emotion sharpens magic, then the entire system of wizarding education may be flawed. By focusing on Latin spells and potion ingredients, it ignores the human core that activates real power. Magic seems less a science and more a conversation between the heart and the world. The rules bend, the feelings matter, the truth is unspoken. What remains is a contradiction that the series never resolves. Magic is taught as a structure, but it behaves like a spirit. It is logical in combat and chaotic in destiny. And those who thrive in its world, Dumbledore, Harry, Luna, do so not because they follow rules, but because they listen to the silence between them. That silence, that strange hum of awareness, is the unspoken current of Rowling's world. We feel it, but we never learn why.